Welcome to the Human Together podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jason Floyd. Human Together is a show that is centered on humanity to create understanding and appreciation for individuals and groups that are both informative and thought-provoking. Welcome back to the Human Together podcast show. I've wanted to do an episode on adoption for some time now. I could have taken an angle by interviewing a DHS worker or having a conversation with an adoption agency, but I wanted this story to be a lot more personable. I know several of my listeners have their own adoption story, and I could have gone to a lot of resources, but ultimately I went to a source that inspired me. I reached out to Markus and Shannon Truelove, who will share their adoption story and hopefully inspire you as well. Welcome to the Human Together podcast show. I'll start with a question about yourselves and your family. Tell me a little bit about that.
So we have a pretty big family. We have 6 kids, of course, 2 parents. Of our 6 kids, we have Cameron, who's about to turn 18, and Markus adopted Cameron, 13 years ago?
Yeah, he had just turned 4 when I adopted him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So pretty close to that. Cameron was mine. I had him when I was pretty young before I met Markus. And then we have Taylor, who's 12. We have Xavier, who's 9. And we have Aaliyah, who's 5, and we adopted them. And then we have Austin, he's our current foster son. He is 7. And Caleb is our biological.
And so you've had several, Markus has told me you've had several kids in and out that you haven't adopted, foster kids.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that experience?
We are therapeutic foster parents. So most of our kids come to us from inpatient facilities. They've experienced maybe more trauma than the standard foster child, which is, anybody in foster care has experienced trauma, but theirs is more so. So they just need a little more help and guidance and patience.
Yeah. And how long do they stay with you? Does it depend on the situation?
It does depend. I think our shortest stay so far has been 7 months, and our longest stay was 2.5 years.
Oh, wow. And some of those that you've adopted them from foster care
Yes.
as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, tell me, the kids that you've adopted, have you gone through an agency, or what was the steps that you guys took for adoption?
Not really an agency. Because we're therapeutic, we do have an agency. But when we adopt, it's through DHS. So DHS is the only agency that we work through for adoption.
What was the process and how long did that take?
When you are foster parents and you're looking to adopt, it's a long process. It is
Years?
Years.
Wow.
It's a complicated process too. And every kid's going to have a different timeline. Mm-hmm. Taylor, our 12-year-old, was with us for 3 years before we got to adopt. That was his first real time in the system. So we had to go through trying to reunite him, and Xavier is his brother. Aaliyah is his youngest sister. Mm-hmm. Trying to reunite them with their parents, and when that was not going to work out, then we had to wait till rights were terminated. And once rights were terminated for their biological parents is when we were able to start looking at adopting.
But even on top of that, they also looked for any relative that would accept them as well. So once the biological parents weren't going to be able to have contact with them, they looked for grandparents or someone
Aunts,
that was
uncles, cousins,
anyone that would be capable of taking care of them.
Anybody biologically related to their parents.
Through DHS, when you have siblings, do they try to keep them together for the most part?
Yes, they really do. There are certain instances where they can't.
Yeah.
Primarily if it's a really large sibling group, or if the siblings have been through just extreme trauma and being together is a trauma trigger for them. But most of the time, they work really hard to keep sibling groups together.
Try to keep them together. So Shannon, this question is for you. I'd like for you to share your story about Aaliyah's adoption. Markus has previously shared it with me, but he tells me that you'll give a little bit of better account about this. Do you care to share about that story?
Oh yeah, I love that story. So how many years ago now? 8 years ago?
That sounds about right.
About right.
Yeah.
Well, Markus and I had been married for about 5 years when we decided that we wanted to have a baby of our own. We already had Cameron because, like I said earlier, Cameron I'd had from a previous relationship. So we decided we want to have a baby of our own, and we tried for several years, and nothing just ever happened. During that time period, our pastor talked about like when you're talking to God, thanking him things for in advance, like things he hasn't given you yet. Go ahead and name what you want and thank him for it, just in the belief. So we would talk about having a baby, and we'd say, if it's going to be a boy, we're going to name it Caleb. And if it's a girl, we're going to name her Aaliyah. And we prayed for them and waited for Caleb or Aaliyah, and it just didn't happen. So we thought, well, God's will. That's okay. We tried for about 3 years, and when it just didn't work, we decided we're going to be foster parents. So we did. We went through the whole process of getting certified to be foster parents, and our very first placement was Taylor, who's now our adopted son. So cool. So we got Taylor, and we went into it thinking we are not going to be an adoptive home. We're only going to be a foster home. That was all we wanted to do. But the moment I saw Taylor,
good kid.
Yeah, well, my heart just said, there's your son.
And literally, like the moment she saw Taylor, she looked at me and said, that's our boy. And we didn't go into it thinking that.
No, we went into it absolutely not an adoptive home. So that was a surprise.
And he came from a pretty bad background as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, a really rough background. He had basically raised his younger brother. Taylor was 6 when he came to us, and he had raised Xavier since he was a baby. Fed him, cared for him, watched him like a babysitter. So Taylor came to us first, and then we got a call about a week later saying, hey, he's got a little brother that needs a home too. And we're like, I'm not sure. We don't want a big family. 2 was our max. That was our plan.
That was our plan.
But we met Xavier, and oh my gosh, fell in love with him immediately, just like Taylor. He was only 3, he's the baby himself. So we thought, well, we got our 3 kids now. We're fully blessed. Thank you, Lord. Felt like he'd answered our prayers. About 2 weeks after we got Xavier, we found out that I was pregnant.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Yeah. And we hadn't even been trying.
No.
That was a surprise.
It was a shock.
Yeah, it was. So we decided to name that baby Caleb, because we've been praying for Caleb for the past 3 years. We were just like, man, we were fully blessed at this point. God has given us even more than we asked for. It was just beautiful. But as the months went on, we got to know their biological mom pretty well. We had lots of meetings with her, and she was still maintaining contact with the boys. We found out that she was also pregnant the same time I was. And though she was maintaining contact and trying in her own way, she was still not living a safe life, not living a life that would allow her to raise a baby. So when she had the baby, and it's really heartbreaking, when she had the baby, she loved that baby. Despite the addictions and all that, she still loved that baby. She was supposed to have it taken from her at birth.
Wow.
and brought to us, but she had the baby and was able to sneak out of the hospital and hide for 2.5 weeks before DHS was able to find her and the baby.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, before they tracked him down. So we knew the baby was there. We knew that it was supposed to come to us at some point, but we didn't know when. And then one day we got the call. They're like, all right, we found mom, we found the baby. We need you to come get her right now. Like, okay, well, that was about...
How much notice did you get?
Oh. None.
So Shannon called. I was at work.
Yeah.
I was a middle school teacher at the time, and Shannon was at the house. She calls me, and Shannon normally doesn't call me during work, so I knew it was a phone call that I needed to take. So she tells me at the time that they found the mother, and the mother has had a little girl. Will we take her? And I'm like just in about 5 months, our household has gone from 1 kid to 4. I'm like, I don't know if we can. Well, she says, well, I have to go see. I have to go see the child. I say, okay, just let me know.
Well, it's Taylor and Xavier's little sister. So we're like, man, and I was 7 months pregnant.
Right.
So, we were like, yeah, we have to go. We have to pick her up. So like he was saying, we knew the baby was there. We knew eventually it was going to come into us, but we didn't know when or any details. Anyways, we got a call and they're like, all right, can you meet us in an hour? And I was like, yeah. Okay, I can meet you at the DHS facility in an hour. So I just loaded up the car and I went. The lady, it was so weird. She met us in the parking lot of the DHS facility. We didn't even go inside and sign paperwork. It was after hours. But we had her brothers, so she knew that we were certified and she knew all that. She met us in the parking lot and Marcus wasn't with me. I think he was still at work at that point. She got out her car and walked over to me and I thought she was just carrying blankets. I didn't realize at first she actually had the baby right there. And she handed me the tiniest baby I've ever held.
Wow.
Well, Aaliyah was a preemie and she only weighed 3 or 4 pounds at birth. And then when she when Mom had run with her, she had not thrived well. So here she was 2.5 weeks, and I think she still only weighed about 4 pounds or so, So she handed me this tiny little baby, and I just thought, oh my gosh, like,
can I do this? Can I?
Overwhelming, kind of terrifying, but just so blessed, because we've been praying for the safety of this baby, well, ever since we found out about her existence. But anyway, so the lady's loading up my car for me, and I'm showing the boys, I'm like, hey, this is your baby sister, and the lady's like, all right, well, contact your caseworker, and she's gonna get all your paperwork done, have a good day. And I'm like, oh my gosh, wait a minute, what's her name? And she goes, oh, Aaliyah. So her mom, since she'd had her and had run off with her, had actually filled out all of her birth certificate work and had named her Aaliyah. Here we were for 3 years praying for God to give us a Caleb or an Aaliyah. And there it was. We had both Caleb and Aaliyah, and Taylor and Xavier.
Did you contact Marcus? What was his?
Yeah, as soon as I got in the car and we got everybody buckled in, I called and I was like, her name's Aaliyah. Her mom named her. And she named her Aaliyah, and he was just like, wow. I mean, it was such a God thing that we had prayed for so long for this baby girl, and here she is, and she had the exact name and everything. But that definitely wasn't the end of the story. DHS's goal was always to reunify, always. But even though we loved Taylor and Xavier and Aaliyah, and my heart said, these are your babies, and I felt like God was saying, these are your babies, the court was saying, they're going back home.
They're going back home.
Yeah. Our very first court appointment with Aaliyah, what did the judge say to you? I'm trying to remember.
I don't remember the exact words, but she was basically letting us know to not get comfortable with them in your home. Don't get too attached, because from what we're seeing right now, they will be going back to their biological parents. And that's what she was telling us in court.
Yeah, she said don't fall in love.
Yeah.
That's what she said.
So reunification is always the number one goal.
Yeah.
DHS and going through the foster care system the way that we did.
And we do agree with that 100%.
Absolutely.
That's our goal, is to help parents and help kids and have them go back to a healthy home. It was a different situation for Taylor and Xavier and Aaliyah, however, because the severity of the neglect.
What was the timeline from then on out?
After we got Aaliyah, it was still another 2.5 years before we were able to adopt.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that whole time they're telling you don't fall in love.
Oh yeah, don't fall in love, don't. And Marcus is like, too late, I mean, we're all on the same page with that pretty much.
And then understanding the story of our little girl Aaliyah coming to us. And we've been praying for Aaliyah for 3.5 years. For me, that gave me peace, knowing that we are always looking for reunification in a healthy environment. And that's the key word, a healthy environment. And the environment that our children would have gone back to was definitely not healthy. So that could have led to a lot of, well, at the time it did lead to a lot of nervousness on our behalf, because we knew that if they go back into that environment, they will be stereotypes. Statistically showing that kids that are in these environments rarely come out in a position where they're successful or in a position where they lead their families to be successful. So we couldn't understand why they would give someone so many chances when they've proven in multiple years that they're not making the right decision. So that right there for us was nerve-wracking at the time.
Yeah.
No, it was hands down the hardest thing I've ever been through.
Wow. That's a great story. I appreciate you sharing it. You're right, Marcus. She tells a little bit better.
Well, hey, during the hardest part of it, they were saying they're going to take the babies, they're going to take all 3 of them and give them to Aaliyah's biological father, who is not the other kid's biological father. And that was just awful to hear, because the abuse that the mother had suffered from him and things like that was just terrifying. But during that really hard process, my cousin came to me and said, hey, do you know what Aaliyah's name means? And I was like, Aaliyah's name, I don't know that has a meaning really. She goes, no, if you look it up in Israeli, Aaliyah means
an
immigrant to a new home.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
And
that was foretelling, wasn't it?
Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's just so beautiful. Like, it gave me a lot of peace at a really hard time to remind myself, God promised us these babies. He even gave them names that meant much more than we had any idea. Like, He knew that we'd need peace at certain times.
That is fantastic.
And it all worked out. Thank God.
That's fantastic. My next question is this, and both of you can field this. For those that are considering adoption, what advice would you give to a potential parent?
Yeah, I would say just be aware that there's a big difference between fostering and adopting. If you want to foster, then go into fostering. If you want to adopt, you probably don't want to foster. Mm-hmm. You can become an adoptive parent through DHS without fostering. That will take a lot of waiting and a lot of patience, and you can totally do it, and it's free. You can adopt for free through the state of Oklahoma, and there are lots of kids that are on waiting lists to be adopted.
Are they all in Oklahoma? The
yes.
Kids are...
Oh yeah, there are so many really. If you want a baby, you probably need to go through a private agency. You could possibly get a baby through DHS, but so many people want babies it just doesn't happen very often. If you want a child that's a little bit older, we have thousands of kids waiting to be adopted, and it's a completely free process. Mm-hmm. And they'll be on Sooner Care until they turn 18. You don't have to provide private insurance. The state really does try to make it as easy and simplified as possible if you want to adopt through DHS. But fostering and adopting are different, so that's the first thing I'd toss out there.
I would say that there's a definite need. So if you're at all interested, get with your significant other, or if you're by yourself, just for us, we pray about any situation before we go into it. So our first step is to see if it's through prayer the direction that we'd like to go. And then after that, then do your research. You have a lot of choice in who you actually adopt. So if there are certain things that you don't like in your house, if you don't want someone who's been abused, or if you don't want somebody who has temper issues, or whatever it is, you get to choose the things that you're okay with in your home. And then they try to match you up with the kid within those boundaries. Yeah. The difficult for me, what's so heartbreaking about it is that you have so many kids that you can still pick what you are okay within your house, and they'll have hundreds of kids that still fit into that category. So there's a definite need. So if you are interested in at all, I would say just look into it.
And I would say don't be scared of older kids. People think if they don't get a baby, they're going to be too scarred or too traumatized, like they won't bond properly. It's not at all
not
true.
The case.
Oh no. Our Taylor, we adopted him finally. He was 8.5.
Something like that.
9, something like that. And he's our baby. He is every bit as bonded with us and a part of our family, and healthy and growing, and just every bit the same as our biological.
That's great. Well, thank you both for taking the time. You have a lovely family, and I appreciate you inviting me into your home today. I'm looking forward to getting the word out about adoption. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Trueloves offer an inspiring story of faith, compassion, and adoption. After our interview, I researched other adoption stories. One inspiring story was offered through the OdysseyOnline.com. I will post the entirety of the story in the link to this episode. To conclude, I'd like to read to you the final lines of the story. Adoption isn't just a piece of paper. It isn't an experiment. Sometimes it fails, and sometimes it succeeds. My story is one that exceeded all expectations because everyone told my parents it was going to be hard and not to expect my sister and me to ever commit to them fully. When you look at my family, you will find that they are by no means perfect, but you can tell that it was the will of God that brought us together. Adoption is for kids from foreign countries, it's for babies, and it's for the 12 and 14-year-old girls who need a home just as much as anyone else. God works in mysterious ways, and because of that, I have the family I wish for every Christmas. I have had the opportunities that are bountiful. I've had relationships that have lasted what seemed a lifetime. I have a beautiful mother that I eerily resemble, and I know my earthly and heavenly Father. Adoption is a powerful tool that can change someone's life in ways that they never thought possible. Awe-inspiring words that remind us to become human together.